start driving my 2000 Camaro. This is my budget HPDE track car. This is the car I'm going to learn how to drive on a road course. And I specifically sought after this car and a V6 in particular. Now I want to get into that. Now I got this car for $1,000, super cheap. My whole goal was to get into driving on a road course for as cheap as possible, to basically where my only expense should be the entry fee to the track. Like that should be my most expensive fee that I have to pay. And so far we are doing pretty good, but I still need to go through the whole tech process, which you'll see me do, and then we need to repair things to get ready for that first event. But so far we're looking good. We got the seats in, we got the steering wheel. Now, why did I look for a V6 in particular? And it's really easy. I wanted something underpowered. I wanted something that I can progress as a driver more than the car can output. So I want to get to the point where my driving skills max out what this car can do, and I think that will be the best way for me to learn. Now, I don't think I'll ever take this like seriously, like full-on racing or anything like that. It's just a hobby for fun that I want to get into. And my dream, my ideal goal is to get into a C5 and build a dedicated C5 track car. What's the closest body type to that? A 4th gen Camaro. Now, I looked at the C4 Corvettes. I think that would have been a great pick too. They're more expensive though. So yeah, I was looking into upgrading to a C5 in the future. So the closest thing to that is a 4th gen Camaro or the C4 Corvette. But I think the 4th gen Camaro shares more of the body characteristics than the C4 does to the C5. And that being because the 4th gen and the C5, they're designed pretty similar from the outside. Now, handling wise, all that stuff, power wise, like there's differences, of course, between C4 and C5. I think C4 is a better car than a 4th gen, but it is what it is. Now, I think a 4th gen V8 Z28 would be a good move too. I think the difference here is the price, obviously, but if you can find a cheap Z28, sure. But the other thing to go after, or to think about, is the V8 is going to be a little bit harder to work on. A little bit. It's doable, people have done it, but you got to keep that in mind. With the V6, the engine's actually moved behind the K-member suspension core support area, so your center of gravity is more towards the middle of the car, so it's technically a mid-engine car, not by much, but technically. So in theory, the V6 4th gen should handle better than a Z28 V8 4th gen if you set them up exactly the same. I don't think we're going to get there. The point of this car is to be a beginner's learner's car. So there's no reason to spend a bunch of money on it. We just want to get into driving as cheap as possible. And the best way is to find a stock car, keep it stock, keep it reliable. That's the goal here. Now, to do a track day or a track event, your car has to pass a tech inspection. So different organizers have different inspection rules and whatnot that your car has to meet in order to be approved to run, but they're generally about the same. So I'm going to run through mine and we'll see what we need to do before our first event. So starting off outside, easy stuff, like you can't have any loose body panels. Obviously you don't want anything falling off. So let's go to the inside real quick. So on the inside of the car, you see I have aftermarket seats. So you want to make sure the seats are properly bolted in, even with OEM seats, I guess, but you want to make sure they're not going anywhere. So these are nice and good. Same thing for the passenger, especially if you're a beginner, since you have to have an instructor. Make sure they're both good. Steering wheel, I have aftermarket steering wheel, so same thing. Make sure it's good. Make sure it's not one of those cheap China ones that are like 20 bucks. You want a good quality wheel if you're going to go with the aftermarket route. Now in the engine bay here, you see the 3.8 liter V6. Everything's looking good. Now you want to make sure we're checking for certain things like belts. You don't want any cracks or fraying on your belt. You want to make sure your belts are in good condition because you don't want them coming off. You want to make sure your fluids are all good and they look good. Now, especially the brake fluid, you want to make sure there's no leaks around here, like nothing from the brake booster or the master. You want to inspect your brake fluid. Take a look inside, make sure it's not dark like mine is. So that means in order to run a track event, we're going to want to flush this fluid out. We'll pump it out, put new fluid in, make sure we're good. Power steering, it's normal for power steering to seep a little bit. You want to make sure it's not gushing out and that you have the right amount of fluid in here. And as you see, this is still new and it's light colored. It's that bluish color. That's because I just did the rack, so we're all good here. You want to check your radiator hoses. You want to make sure they're not bulging or deformed or soft or anything like that. Sometimes that can happen and that's a sign that a hose is about to pop. But this one seems to be in good condition. The lower one down there seems to be good as well. They're not swelled or anything like that. Another good spot to look is the battery. They are going to check that your battery is secured, because if you crash, you roll over something, the battery jumps up, moves around, and shorts out, well, that's a problem. So you want to make sure that the battery does not move, and this one actually does. So we might be able to adjust that bolt to secure it a little bit better, and I can lift straight up and it's coming out. So it's not secured, we need to adjust that. Now, my particular organizer doesn't mention this, but I've seen others mention this, where you have to cover your terminals, and they make like a cover, basically. It's a plastic cover. Now, this one, you see, it's been rigged up with the bolt and the nut, a common F-body thing to do. So I need to fix that. I want it covered. I don't want any chance of anything getting shorted out here. And that about wraps it up from up here. Next, we want to start checking for leaks. And up top here, I don't see any leaks. I see some film and just grease, but I don't see any obvious leaks. Like, I don't see anything coming from the valve covers or nothing like that. So we're good here. Let's move to the bottom side and continue checking for fluid leaks. Now, under the car here, we can take a look for leaks. As you see, the top of the engine looks pretty clean. This oil filter here looks pretty good. However, back here, this is like the front of the oil pan area. It's drenched. And I've already looked. I can't really see it coming from anywhere up above. It just kind of starts around this front crank seal and then drips down. Now, a seeping leak is not necessarily something you have to fix, but something that is actively dripping onto the floor, which will leave a puddle if you're just idling there for a couple minutes, that needs to be addressed. And we're going to try our best to address this before the event. And it looks like we have fluid on the boot here. Now, I previously replaced the rack because it was leaking out of here, and it actually had a hole out of here. There's no hole out of here. However, looking up, we can see a little bit of film, and then all the way up here I see more fluid. So something's coming up from up here, whether it's this hard line here or the high pressure line here. So we actively have a leak. It's power steering, so I'm gonna most likely be able to take care of this before the event and try to. Oh, you know what? Actually, I can see it. I see it it's dripping off of the power steering reservoir up there. The hose is colored and it's wet. So it must be above the lines then. We must have something up higher. So I'll add that to the list. We gotta check that. Something's going on up there. Now back here, this is my biggest concern. This is where the drip actively comes off down to the floor. And as you see, it's pulling up on the exhaust, so you can smell it burning oil. So whatever it is, it's making its way back here. And then the transmission back here is coated. It's not actively dripping off the transmission, and I don't believe the transmission itself is leaking because I don't see anything from up top. It just seems to be oil making its way, moving all the way down that way. So no concern with the transmission as of now. Whatever this oil leak though, this is the concern. And as you see, the oil pan bolts here, every single one of them has oil on them. And I can see oil just all around the perimeter of this pan here, and I don't really see much above. So right now I'm thinking either front crank seal or the oil pan is leaking. It could be rear main too. Let's take a better look at that. So we're back here under the transmission, close to the rear main. As you see, there's oil everywhere, but I really won't know if it's the rear main without taking off the inspection cover, which requires removing the starter. And we already had the starter off, so that's a little frustrating. But we definitely want to figure it out now before it's too late. So what I will do is when I take care of the oil leak in the front, we're going to clean down this area and we're going to see if it comes back. And that's how we're going to address it and move forward. So that's going to do it for checking for fluid leaks. We see we have an oil leak that we want to address, and we have a game plan to move forward with. So now we're moving on to suspension. So we're going to check our wheel bearings and our tie rods. So side to side, up and down. Wheel bearings feels just fine here. We're going to go all the way around all four corners, make sure it's good everywhere. Okay, now we're going to check our suspension and steering stuff. So this is the outer tie rod. That ball joint looks good. We have our sway bar up here. It's a little cracked, but it seems fine. It's not disintegrated or anything like that. We have our shock here. We want to make sure it's not leaking or anything. It's a little dirty, but that looks pretty good. Seems to be doing its job. And then our tires. So this is the other important part. You don't want tires with patches or repairs on them. So we need to check, make sure we don't have any of those. And then you need okay tread. If you're a beginner, not as important as someone who's going to really push the car, but as a beginner, we just want enough tread to last us there, and if you're driving, to be able to get there and back. Now, as you see, we have a wear mark. We seem to be wearing on the edges, not so much on the inside. That means the tire's been underinflated and driven like that most of the time. So we'll fix that. But these are going to do just fine for a beginner like me. They'll last at least 2 events, maybe 3, and then we'll be able to upgrade to better tires. The other thing with tires is the age. You don't want tires that are too old. They will be dry rotted and then you'll have issues. So over here you see the numbers 2319. That's the 23rd week of 2019. Sometimes they're on the inside or sometimes they're on the outside. I prefer when they're on the outside, obviously, but so the front tires are from 2019. Checking on the back here, these ones are from 21. Now this particular organizer doesn't have a specified year or age for the tires that you're allowed to run. Typically they're about 3 to 5 years. Somewhere younger than that is good. So probably don't do anything older than 5 years. 2019 coming up in 2024 would be 5 years. So I'm going to say those are going to be the last year those tires get ran for sure. But checking the tread depth on these ones, they are good. So these 21s in the back, year 21, they seem to be in much better condition than the front. So I'm looking at replacing the front 2 tires before 2 years from now. So I should be able to get a year's worth out of those tires and then replace them for the following season. And now I'm talking only like 3 or 4 events in a season, so nothing too crazy. Still a beginner. You're not really going to eat the tires all that bad. Before you put your car back on the ground like me, check the brakes. You also want to inspect that, make sure you're good and have no brake fluid leaks at the calipers. So this car has disc brakes all 4 ways, and you want to make sure they're not warped or cracked or showing any hot spots or anything like that. These ones look good. And then check your brake pad. Now I know these ones are good, but I'll just show you real quick. I can fit a pick in here and I can go up and down, and all that movement is brake pad material. So these pads are brand new basically, and check them on the inside too, don't forget to do that. Same thing on the rears, we're checking for wheel bearings. That seems good. Let's check the other side and then we'll be done. Wheel bearings seems fine here. Now, previous owner told me it was this wheel bearing that was bad. I don't see it. However, when you drive the car, there's this rattly, drony noise. Sounds like metal tinging. Well, check out the exhaust here. That's our noise right there. It's hitting that and it's causing this tinging. So we need to secure this a little bit better. That will just prevent that annoying noise. I don't think it actually is at risk of coming off, but we might as well secure this and be safe. Now the differential down there was covered in grease and grime and oil, but it never actively dripped, so I'm not going to worry about it. If anything, we can spend the time to just clean it up and keep an eye on it, but I think we're good there. Now as far as I know, that's everything this car needs in order to pass our tech inspection. We've hit the basics. We know we need to address some oil leaks and a power steering leak apparently. And other than that, our tires are good, our brakes are good, our suspension, steering, ball joints, all that. Wheel bearings, that seems to be good condition. So this car is in pretty good shape. Just a few things like the oil leaks to take care of. Thank you for watching. This is our budget HPDE track car. Let's see how it goes, see if we stay in budget, and see if it was the right decision to go to a V6, or if we should just pay it a little bit more for the C4 or the Z28. We'll see. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.